I want to talk about them first, because there's a haunting quality to their energy that I can't step past without addressing it. There's something almost restless in what I'm sensing, like a person who keeps returning to a memory they didn't expect to keep returning to. You know that experience of thinking about someone you were sure you were finished thinking about, and then suddenly there they are again at 2 in the morning, or in the middle of a perfectly ordinary afternoon, and you can't quite explain why? That's where they are. That's the loop they're in. But here's what's interesting, and I want you to stay with me on this. The loop isn't about missing you in the sentimental, romantic way you might initially assume. It's more complicated than that. It's layered with something closer to recognition. Reckoning. There's a confrontation happening inside of them that doesn't involve you at all, because you've already moved a step or two ahead. The confrontation is between who they presented themselves to be and who they actually know themselves to be. And you were the witness. You were the person standing at the edge of that gap, looking across it clearly, and they couldn't pretend the gap didn't exist when you were watching. That's what's haunting them. Not your absence. Not even what happened between you. It's the fact that you saw. That you walked away, or stepped back, or went quiet, or however this played out for you specifically, with an understanding of them that they never intended to give anyone. Something about your clarity threatens a version of themselves they've been carefully protecting. A self-concept that depends on never truly being known, never truly being accountable, never truly being caught in the space between who they say they are and who they actually are. This is interesting, because I'm also getting that they've worked hard, consciously or unconsciously, to surround themselves with people who don't look too closely. People who accept the performance. People who find it easier, or more comfortable, or even more socially graceful, to not ask the harder questions. And then there was you. I want to be careful here, because I don't want to paint this in a way that makes it sound like they're purely a villain in your story, because that's not quite right either, and I think your intuition already knows that. They're not simply a bad person who deceived you. It's more nuanced than that. What I'm sensing underneath the surface of their behavior, underneath the deflection and the constructed persona and the way they've moved through this, is a deep, unexamined fear of being found inadequate. Of being truly seen and truly rejected for what's there. There's almost a sadness to it when I sit with it long enough. Because somewhere in their history, they learned that being fully known meant being vulnerable to loss. So they became very good at controlling the narrative. Very good at showing people the version of themselves most likely to be accepted, admired, or kept. And the tragedy of that is that it works, until it doesn't. Until someone comes along who isn't satisfied with the version. Someone who keeps listening past the words. Someone who keeps feeling past the performance. Someone who, quietly and without confrontation, simply knows. That was you. And I'm hearing something like, and I want to offer this gently, they weren't entirely prepared for what it felt like to be loved or seen at that depth. Even if the dynamic between you wasn't what would classically be called love, there was a depth of recognition in what you offered them that they couldn't fully receive without it terrifying them a little. Because real seeing is both a gift and a risk. You gave it freely. They didn't know what to do with it. Now I want to turn toward you. Because this reading isn't just about them, it's also about something quietly extraordinary happening within you, and I don't want to rush past it. There's a quality to the energy around you right now that feels like coming home to yourself after a long time away. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But incrementally, the way morning arrives, without announcement, simply brightening until you realize the dark is gone. Something is settling in you. A kind of quiet inner authority that doesn't need to announce itself. A knowing that doesn't need to be validated by anyone else's agreement. This matters because, and I want to ask you this gently, for some of you, part of the weight of this experience was watching yourself shrink to accommodate someone who didn't reciprocate that care. Part of the difficulty wasn't just what they did or didn't do, it was watching yourself bend, soften, question, minimize, all in service of a connection that was never quite balanced in the way it should have been. Does that land? That particular kind of exhaustion, not from conflict, but from the effort of holding space for someone who never learned how to hold it back? And yet, and this is where it gets really interesting to me, even through all of that, you never fully lost the thread back to yourself. There's a resilience here that runs deep. Not the loud, defiant kind. The quiet kind. The kind that simply keeps returning to your own center even when you've been pushed far from it. Even when you entertained doubt. Even when you questioned everything you knew. Something in you always came back. Something fundamental held. That's not a small thing. That's enormous, actually. Because I'm also sensing that this experience, as complicated, as draining, as disorienting as it was, cracked something open in you that needed to be cracked open. And I say that with tremendous care, because I don't mean it in a way that minimizes what you went through. Pain is not a lesson we're required to receive gratefully. But when I look at the energy around you now, there is genuinely something illuminated. Something you understand about your own worth, your own perception, your own spiritual intelligence, that you didn't have the same relationship to before. You know your intuition more intimately now. You've tested it. You've watched it be right when you wanted it to be wrong. You've felt the discomfort of knowing something before you were ready to act on it. And you came through that, and you're still here, and now there's a kind of quiet confidence in the way you're moving forward that feels earned. Deeply, personally earned. This feels like someone who gave more than they received for longer than they should have, and who finally, not with bitterness, but with a clarity that took time to develop, recognized that they deserved more. That the standards they were holding others to were also standards they deserved to have held for themselves. I'm also noticing, this is subtle but I want to name it, there's something around comparison that has been a quiet drain on your energy. Not necessarily comparing yourself to them, but something broader. A habit of measuring your progress, your worth, your situation against others who seem to have something you want. And I think this experience, in some unexpected way, has begun to dismantle some of that. Because when you go through something that strips you back to your own essential self, what other people have, what other people's timelines look like, what other people's relationships seem to be, it starts to feel less relevant. Your story starts to feel more specifically, irreducibly yours. And that's actually a kind of spiritual freedom. There's an invitation here, still being extended to you, not one you've missed, to release the urge to measure. To stop using other people's lives as a reference point for whether yours is going the right direction. Because the direction you're going is uniquely yours. The timing of your life is calibrated to something larger than a social comparison. And when you can really settle into that truth, not just intellectually but in your body, in your daily choices, something opens up that's hard to describe. A kind of ease. A kind of presence. A kind of trust. And this brings me to something I want to sit with for a moment, because I keep feeling pulled back to it. Timing. For some of you watching this, there's an impatience that lives just underneath the surface. A quiet frustration with how long things are taking, not just with this person, not just with this situation, but with your life more broadly. Like you've done the inner work, you've grown, you've shifted, you understand things now that you didn't understand before, and yet the outer circumstances haven't quite caught up yet. The relationship you want isn't here. The clarity you're waiting for hasn't fully landed. The next chapter hasn't opened the way you expected it to. And I want to speak to that directly, because the energy here is very specific about this. What I'm sensing is that the gap you're experiencing between where you are and where you want to be is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's not a punishment. It's not evidence of unworthiness. It's actually something closer to preparation. There are pieces being arranged that you can't see from where you're standing right now. There are developments in motion that haven't revealed themselves yet. And the work you've done, the internal shifting, the releasing, the coming back to yourself, that work is not going unaccounted for. It's being translated. Just not always on the timeline you'd choose if you were the one writing the script. It almost seems as if something has been quietly shifting behind the scenes for longer than you realize. And the version of this story that's still unfolding carries a different quality than what came before, something more aligned, more authentic, more sustainable. But it asks something of you. It asks for a particular kind of trust that isn't passive. It's not, sit still and wait. It's, keep moving, keep growing, keep choosing yourself, and trust that the larger orchestration is happening even when you can't see the whole picture. I'm hearing something like, the waiting is not wasted time. Even when it feels like nothing is moving, even when the silence is uncomfortable, something is being prepared. Something is being aligned. And when it arrives, and I do feel strongly that something is arriving, it will have a quality of rightness that rushing would have prevented. Let me come back to the dynamic between you and this other person one more time, because there's something here that I feel would be incomplete if I didn't address it. There's a curiosity, an almost spiritual curiosity, that's woven through this entire reading. And I don't think it's accidental. Part of what's driving the depth of this experience, the reason it's been so layered and so resonant, is that on some level you've been genuinely curious about human nature. About what makes people do what they do. About why someone would choose performance over authenticity, distance over depth, deflection over honesty. And instead of hardening around that curiosity, instead of closing off and deciding that people are simply not trustworthy, you've let it open you a little. Let it ask questions of you that are worth asking. Why do people hide? What are they protecting? What kind of wounds create the need for a constructed self? And then, turned inward, where have I done this? Where have I hidden? Where have I been less than fully honest about what I need, what I feel, what I want? Because the deepest readings, the ones that genuinely shift something, are never entirely about the other person. They're always also about you. And what I see in your energy is someone who has been genuinely engaged in that more difficult, more courageous question. Not just, what did they do to me, but, what does this reveal about what I'm here to learn? Not from a place of self-blame, but from a place of genuine spiritual curiosity about the nature of human connection. That quality is rare. And it matters. Because people who carry that quality, people who stay curious and open even after they've been disappointed, they attract something different going forward. They create something different. They stop recreating the same dynamics unconsciously because they've been willing to look at the pattern consciously. Now, I want to say something about what's coming. Because the energy doesn't leave you in this in-between place. It moves forward. And what I see ahead carries a quality that I want to describe carefully so it lands right. It's not dramatic. It's not a sudden reversal or a grand rescue or a moment of cinematic revelation. What I'm seeing is something quieter and more lasting than that. It's a settling into alignment, with yourself first, and then naturally, organically, with the people and circumstances that match who you're becoming. There's an outcome that's been quietly assembling itself, not through force, not through you managing or controlling or pushing, but through you consistently choosing to return to your own truth. Through you deciding, over and over, often in small ways, that you deserve honesty. That you deserve depth. That you deserve a kind of love and connection that doesn't require you to question your own perception. And that choosing, that repeated, sometimes quiet, sometimes costly choosing, has been building towards something. Something that feels aligned in a way the previous chapter never quite did. Not perfect. Not without its own complexity. But genuinely aligned. Genuinely matched to who you are, not who you were willing to become to keep someone comfortable. For some of you, this will show up in a relationship, a new one, or a deepened one with someone already present who you may have underestimated. For others, it's going to show up as something internal, a moment where you simply feel different. Where the old longing or the old wound doesn't have the same grip. Where you wake up one morning and notice, almost with surprise, that you feel free. Not from them specifically, but from the version of yourself that needed them to be different in order to be okay. That's a profound kind of freedom. And it's available to you. Before I close this, I want to offer something that feels like it's been sitting underneath this entire reading, waiting for the right moment to be said. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not too much, or too sensitive, or too perceptive, or too aware. You are not the problem in this story. The clarity you carry, that particular quality of seeing, of knowing, of sensing beneath the surface, that is not a curse. It is a gift that has not yet found all the people and places where it will be fully recognized and met. But it will. And when it does, there will be something in you that finally exhales. Completely. Without reservation. The person this reading is about? They're going to have to sit with what they know. There is no escaping the truth when it's been seen. There is no undoing genuine clarity once it's been extended and received, even if only partially. They may not say it out loud. They may not come to you with an admission or an acknowledgement. But in the privacy of their own quiet moments, something has shifted for them too. Something they can't fully name has been disturbed. And that disturbance, whatever they do with it, whether they use it to grow, or resist it, or bury it, that is no longer your responsibility to manage. It belongs to them now. What belongs to you is everything you've already been moving toward. The steadiness you're finding. The ease that's beginning to arrive. The sense of self that has proven, through all of this, to be more resilient than you perhaps gave it credit for. That belongs to you entirely. No one can haunt that away from you. No one can unsee you from yourself. You're not imagining this shift. It's real. It's earned. And it's only the beginning of something that I feel genuinely good about for you. Not because everything will be easy from here, but because you are different now. And different people walk into different rooms. Trust the timing. Trust the process that's already in motion. Trust, most of all, the quiet part of you that has been right about more than you've given it credit for. Because that part? That's not going anywhere. That's where your real strength has been living all along. Take good care of yourself. Truly.